Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Success After Trauma, where we bring on special guests and they share their story of what their struggles were like, what got them to where they are now, and in their journey, what that aha moment was like, what their personal journey was like, what they went through, some of their discoveries, and then how they're serving today. Because it's all about allowing ourselves to heal so that we can help heal other people. Today's guest is Emily Grace. I'm excited to have Emily on. She has created a unique coaching method that helps women reclaim their power by moving through challenging life transitions to wholeness. Then clearing everything in that subconscious mind in a way of this using somatic tools, embodiment practices, and breath work. The ultimate result of this transformative coaching is deepened spiritual connection, acceptance of self, embodied boundaries, inner wisdom, and a new relationship to your power that allows you to live life on your terms. Emily, I love everything about this. You specifically empower women, which I think is incredible. I mean, let me take that back. Every niche group needs their own niche empowerment. And us as a species, empowerment is one of my core values. I love everything about what you have going on. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of maybe take us back to the beginning of how this all even took place and initiated?
Awesome. Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that. And I'm happy to share, what led me to this work was, going through my own journey and realizing I had trauma. And I grew up in a family where emotions weren't really talked about. And, you kind of had to, everything was taken care of from a physical perspective. But I had an experience in early childhood where I had childhood cancer when I was 3. And, I went through that and the mentality after, thank goodness, was just like, move on, that's in the past. And it wasn't until I was in my early 20s and I moved to New York City and I was very anxious and I was getting triggered, by all the loud noises and emotions. And I started seeing a doctor then, and they told me, based on your history, like you have anxiety and you've had it your whole life. And it was just this light bulb of, wow, I have been living and operating in this way that I didn't even know, just because I didn't have the awareness, I didn't have the tools. And that really led me on this journey of introspection. And shortly after that, my dad passed unexpectedly. And so I was going through grief and depression, and I had to find a way to navigate these changes. And my emotions, which I hadn't dealt with up until that point, were just, I couldn't avoid them and I couldn't numb anymore. And that's what I had been doing. You grow up and you're really in condition to drink or socialize and go out to kind of numb these things. And that wasn't working for me anymore. So I was led to therapy, to meditation, and I just kept following each next step of like, okay, what's going to help
Mm.
me next? And eventually that led me to coaching. And I knew that through my own experience, because not only when my dad passed away was I realizing that I was in a career that was not for me at all. And I had gone through workplace trauma. And so I was trying to figure out what is my next step. And I figured that it was coaching because I knew that I had these tools now that I could help other people with. And I started doing that. And I really was became aware when I was helping people with mindset coaching and spiritual coaching that a big part was missing of this embodiment work, and the body being a big part of trauma and being stored in the nervous system. So I realized I was really neglecting this whole part of the trauma cycle. When you don't complete trauma, it gets stored in the body as frozen tension. And so I was led to learn about breath work and become trained as to be a facilitator and started using that with clients. And then that eventually led me to embodiment work because I realized, as an entrepreneur, and I think I've seen you talk about this too on your Facebook page of like, when you are an entrepreneur, you are very visible and you have an audience. And it was actually like so much sensation for me to hold that it felt very challenging. And so I realized with women I work with and people I know that are very high achieving that a lot of trauma that they have can cause them to want to hide, to want to be small. And so it really was this liberating practice for myself and for my clients as well of how do you take up space and how do you just let your unique self, like the real you, not the one that's experienced the trauma and has these coping mechanisms, but just let that part of you take up more space in yourself. And I found that that was actually the key to fulfillment and to empowerment is to just be more of who you are and be that fully.
Man, I gotta write that down. Be more of who you are and be that full. I'm literally writing that down. I need a minute. That is
Amazing.
powerful.
Yeah.
Give me 1 second, everyone. I literally want to remind myself of that. Of course, we could read that sentence. We're like, yeah, be ourselves. Like we know. But that was a very profound way that those words were all sequenced together to make that sentence. Be more
Mhm.
of who you are. And what was it? Be more of who you are and be that. What was it?
Be that fully.
Be that fully. Let me write that last one. That's powerful, and I love that as a mantra. Again, that's something I'm going to hang up to remind myself. I'm huge on this, and for everyone listening, like, well, like nothing. Let me literally say, I am actively on a journey of taking up space and being myself. I'm actively on that journey, and I'm going to write this down and put it as an anchor in my office so that I see it every day.
I love that.
And I say that for everyone listening to say, if you think to yourself, we can realize the struggles or the challenges we have to go forth on the journey that we want to go, or we can realize the strength that we have. It doesn't get easier; we get stronger. We've heard that sentence, that saying before, and we got to allow ourselves to continue to get stronger. Emily, thank you. I'm so sorry. I just like dove in and stole it.
Not at all.
You just
That's
mesmerized me with that one.
awesome.
Tell me a little bit about, if you will, first, if it's okay, can I ask you a couple questions?
Absolutely.
Okay. I have some curiosities, if you'd be willing to share, and if any of these are, um, if you're not comfortable sharing any of these, you'll simply just share with everyone that we're not going to share that, and that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
So if we can talk about cancer at 3 years old, oh my gosh. And
Yeah.
please let me say to you, I'm sorry that got brushed under the rug. I mean,
Mhm.
everyone was doing the best they could then, I'm sure. They were freaked out. I get it. But I'm also sorry. That's not a brush under the rug thing.
Thank you.
It-
Yeah.
Would you share a little bit about maybe what type of cancer, how was it found, and maybe a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, I'm happy to share. Yeah, so I had leukemia and they discovered it when I think I was 2 and then I had pneumonia and like I wasn't getting better. And so they took me to the hospital and thank God I grew up in Boston, Boston Children's Hospital, and I think I was in the best place for that. But yeah, I started treatment right away and I went through a few different treatments that I went through chemo, obviously, and I had bone marrow transplant and a lot of other things. And obviously, as a little kid, that's very stressful. But I kind of learned at that point to almost like dissociate a bit from my
Mm-hmm.
body and just like, I do think I had a lot of positive support around me, like my family being like, you can do this, and like very much like a great mindset about it. And yeah, so I was going through that for almost 2 years. And, after it was like, okay, like let's move forward and kind of put that in the past, which I think is like a trauma kind of survival mechanism. Like you don't really want to dwell on it. But then, I never actually like looked back and like processed like that's a lot of developmental trauma between, the ages of 0 and 8. I think that's when you're really like creating these beliefs about yourself and about the world and what's safe and what isn't. And so, yeah, and I don't think, the people in my family had their own support in navigating that either. So it's probably a little bit hard to give that to me, but I'm very, very thankful I made it through that. And I think it did, give me some wisdom and perspective at a young age of like, how do you navigate something like that and have faith throughout the process.
I'm sure it did. I have to believe that like a lot. Like the way you said it, I have to suggest that it might be even 10 times more than you even realize now. Maybe,
Right.
maybe. So something that I want to just highlight and chat about for a minute. We, as a species as a whole, these are just my projections. As a whole, we're doing better with um, mental health and trauma awareness. We're doing we're doing a lot better, and we'll continue to do better, and that's good. Um, the truth of the matter is, I wouldn't say that we failed as a species in the past. We kind of had other priorities like world wars and Great Depressions. Um,
Exactly.
we actually just have enough luxuries now to actually care for these things, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
Um, but we didn't know. We only knew what we knew in the past, and you highlighted on. I wanted to talk for just a moment for all the listeners, because most of us all have probably been through this at some level in some area or chapter in our life. We tend to, so a very natural response is to dissociate during the trauma. So I have some child abuse when I was younger, and so I learned to dissociate very, very, like I would coach myself when I was being like, do this so they'll stop, or do that,
Yeah.
or act this way. And I remember like telling myself, do this thing. Well, how was I telling myself? I was dissociated. When we're dissociated, the emotional connection fully detaches. So now I
Mm,
don't have to feel bad for myself. So when we have very traumatic events, our neurology naturally puts us in a dissociation to protect us, because now we don't have to feel it.
yeah.
So then we get to the other side. We get to the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm like, oh shit, I'm badass. We're good. Let's put that behind us. Because we're
Yeah.
like, I made it all the way through that. Uh, we- those emotions, I think, still have to be addressed.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, like even like maybe like that upset me, or that made me sad, or that made me hurt, or that made me feel inadequate. And until we actually go, like making it through is awesome. Like I think dissociating is like a beautiful gift that we have as a species to make it through. But
Definitely.
like you talked about, and again, first and foremost, at that time for you, there was people only knew what they knew. But for everyone listening, and as we go forward, just because you made it through something, um, well, let me say that a little bit different. Once you make it through something in a dissociated position, you're now in a safe place to be able to evaluate those emotions, but they still have to be evaluated. Emily, dive in. I could tell you got something for us.
Yeah, yeah. I was just gonna say that beautiful mechanism of survival, but then you do have that time when I think you have everything, you have stability in your life, you're safe. Like that's the time where you can go in and address these things when you have the tools and you're out of the danger for sure.
Beautiful. What about, would you share a little bit about, I'm familiar with, I'm not painting a picture in my mind when you say I went down the road of embodiment work. I'm actually not painting a picture in my mind. Would you elaborate a little bit for me?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, because I had gone through these experiences and learned to disassociate, disconnect, I essentially was very disconnected from my body
Mhm.
and my emotions, and I was living from a very like logical space. So, I was only able to access that part of myself, and I learned a lot through therapy, and I tried different types of therapy like EMDR and I noticed like something is missing and I'm still holding all this underneath the surface. And how do I get to that? So, actually, funnily enough, the first embodiment tool that I really was drawn to was psilocybin. And I went on a few mushroom journeys, and I worked with a psilocybin integration coach. And that was able to help me like access these parts of
Mm,
myself that I couldn't mentally do. And it brought it to the surface and was like, here's what's going on. And then I was drawn to breath work, which is really this tool
mm,
where you're out of your head and you're in your body because you're just focusing on the breath. And most of trauma can be stored in our lungs, like the grief, and our our pelvis region as well holds so much trauma. And so those were the tools that helped me just become more embodied and connect with my emotions.
mm,
Whereas, therapy is great. I still do trauma therapy, and I think it's a lifelong journey as well. But I really just saw a difference in how I could show up and act and not be triggered when I had this full spectrum of myself. And, I learned from the book Waking the Tiger by Peter Levine that this trauma, even though you went through, is always seeking completion. So I noticed that even though I'd gone through it, I was still like repeating these kind of stressful patterns in workplaces I was in. And it wasn't until like I could complete the cycle through embodiment work that I was able to just like fully let it go.
That is so powerful. Have you so I'll share I'd love to chat a little bit about if you're open to um the realm of well quantum, I'll use that label.
Yeah.
So psilocybin I've only had the experience of microdosing twice. I was a bit nervous. So very like
Yeah.
I was guided by someone. I said, hey, just what and they provided me what would be an appropriate microdose, and then I took half of that because I was nervous. so,
Yeah.
so so I've only
Yeah.
had two exposures, but I will have more exposures with psilocybin in the future. And then I also have I in the future, within the next year, I plan on having my first ayahuasca experience.
Amazing.
Have you experienced ayahuasca yet by chance?
I haven't. It's funny. I was just talking about this with my friend this week. Like, I am feeling very drawn to that. And when I first learned about it a few years ago, I was like, I have to do this. This seems like the most, healing you can receive. And then I learned that, your ego essentially dissolves. And so I realized, like, okay, I have to be in the best state possible to
Mm-hmm.
approach this with
Mm-hmm.
the right intention. And I'm really feeling like that time is now. And so I'm so happy to hear that you're gonna do that, in the next year too.
I'm very called. When I say the next year, I have to. That's my belief. That's what I feel that I'm
Yeah,
called to. It'll. I am very congruent in allowing this experience to happen when it's supposed to happen.
exactly.
Yes, so I'm not going to control it and say I've decided it's my time. But very called to the experience. I'm very congruent. I'm very sure that there's a time and an experience for me. And so for everyone listening, some people are kind of getting what we're saying, and some people are like, "What kind of foreign language are they talking?" Um, I love that. So there's The Body Keeps the Score. Have you read that one? Probably, I
I
assume.
haven't read it, but I've definitely
Okay.
heard of it.
And for everyone listening, it's a really good book. It's worth a read. Now, I will say it's very much so about the is that a fair sentence? The neurology of trauma.
Okay.
So it's really about what's going on inside, like how like you were talking about, like really has to do with like how the body is storing this trauma, what it means at a neurological level, what
Yeah.
your forgive me, but your fight or flight, I forget the
Yes.
name of it, but for your nervous system and how it's reacting. And so the book is more on the deep side of like how the body is actually responding to trauma. But with
Mhm.
that being said, I think they talk about in that book, and I've read other books where psilocybin. Everyone listening, we're talking about mushrooms, trippy mushrooms, magic mushrooms, whatever you want to call it. And so they have psilocybin is the ingredient in them that are creating what most people would use a label as hallucinations.
Mhm.
And so there's been studies done with humans, and I know specifically wartime trauma in which they were hooked up to, which one is the head and the heart? Is it ECG, EKG? Which one's the head?
Oh yeah,
I think it's
maybe
ECG.
ECG. Yeah, that sounds
I
right.
think. Yeah, we're gonna use that one, right? Someone's listening and they're like, "That's wrong." Well, you guys know what I mean. So they hooked him up, asked him some questions, and watched the brain activity about the trauma. They asked questions about and watched the brain activity, and then they were given responses. The subject gave responses, and then they were microdosed on the psilocybin, and then they were hooked up again and asked a series of questions that were worded slightly different, but would trigger the same response or the same, they would go to the same event in their mind. And there were parts of the brain that lit up vibrantly that support empathy that simply did not light up before.
Wow.
What do you think, like, to like, I'm not a scientist, but what do you think is going to happen when you're able to process your trauma with empathy?
Hate.
That's wild to think
Yeah.
about. Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
that's
Go. What do you got? Go ahead,
incredible.
Emily.
Yeah, that's incredible. And that's actually like what I experienced, during those journeys. And I did just feel like so much compassion for myself and
Mm.
yeah, so much, yeah, I guess empathy towards the experience, towards everyone involved. And I even remember one specific learning from my first ceremony was like, you're not a burden. Like there was this
Mm.
thing that I was carrying around because, probably when I was growing up and I was sick and I knew it was stressful and I just told myself like I'm a burden. It was like, oh, okay. Like didn't know that was there, but it's just like telling you it in a very safe way. And I know there's other types of MDMA and things like that that are also being researched, but I found that psilocybin was a very gentle way. And like you, I was very, very
Mm-hmm.
nervous. And so that's why I wanted to work with a coach. And she prepared me like for months ahead of it
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
use somatics as well. So it was like helpful to like build that safety in my body because you don't know what's gonna come up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a good that for many and many years, like I was deathly afraid of. I had no experiences with it. I think I shared a moment ago. I have two experiences of microdose and psilocybin. For many a years, I was definitely afraid of going down that road because I didn't want to face what would come up.
Yes.
And then through years of healing, I finally said, "Oh, no, no, no! I want to see what's there. What's left?
Yeah.
What else is
Yeah.
hiding in there?" It becomes so addicting, the healing journey, doesn't it?
It does, it does. It's like you wanna keep digging deeper and you wanna, support yourself and free yourself from these things that are holding you back, and I feel like that I'm constantly on this journey of, like, learning more and implementing new tools and seeing how it shows up, and I just find that it can be really fun when you approach it that way, like, not in a way
Mm.
of, like, fixing yourself, but, like, wanting to get to know yourself better and see what's going on inside.
Yes, yes, man. Thank you for everyone listening. I that was again just perspective and how you worded that. We may decide to let go of the journey of fixing ourselves and go on a journey of learning who we are.
Yes.
Wow, that is powerful.
And I say this from experience because I was approaching it from the other perspective before of like, okay, what's the next thing I gotta fix? And then, it was just like, oh, am I gonna be doing this my whole life? And, I had to shift my perspective of like, there's nothing wrong. And it's just like
Boom.
getting to know yourself and see what's going on within and how you can have empathy for yourself throughout that process.
I love it. It removes ego. Ego
Yeah.
is I got to fix myself. I fixed it. Problem
Yeah.
solved. I did it. The journey of finding yourself is real, and real. I love this. Thank you so much. This conversation is incredible. So much power in this. The journey of learning ourselves is realizing, I think, and I'm going to speak from, this is me projecting, so it's almost like I'm speaking from my journey here. So, there's a time when there was a time when would I thought there was a right and a wrong way of what
Mm.
makes you happy and upsets you, and was I allowed to be upset at this, and am I allowed to not like sauerkraut and whatever else the case may
Right.
be. And when we free ourselves of that and allow ourselves to just learn ourselves and realize that we are freaking absurdly unique, and it's really cool to find out all the intricacies of what makes us tick at the highest frequency.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that. Yeah, we're all unique, and I find that that's where our superpower is, like understanding how unique we are, how magnetic we become when we're just authentically ourselves. And that's why like little children, they're just so
Mm.
authentic and they say whatever comes to mind, and you just like you love them so much, and you're just yeah, you appreciate so much. And that's like really who we are underneath all the conditioning and like the experiences that we went through. And it's possible to embrace that part of ourselves and experience it. And I really found that embodiment helps to be with the positive emotions, be with the negative emotions, and not label them, and just be like,
Mm.
oh, I'm experiencing this part of the spectrum right now. And that's
Powerful.
great. Yeah.
Oh, you can keep going, Emily. It was just powerful.
Oh, yeah, yeah, I think it just helped me because I used to label things like, oh, being angry or being sad as like avoid, avoid, avoid. And now it's just like, oh, this is part of life and I get to experience these emotions. And if I want to experience the highs as well, it's like you have to be able to be fully present with the lows too.
Man, I love it. I love how you talked about the label, like because I know that again, from my experience, big time. I thought I used to be really good at anger through all my experiences. So that was my like expression of like everything. Like happy, show anger. Sad, show anger. Jealous, show anger.
Wow.
And that was it was quite a journey and of overcoming that. And so when I first to say began overcoming the earlier stages of that journey, I've been on my journey for a little bit over 12 years. And probably about like 2 or 3 years in, I thought I had like got control over anger, which I didn't, not even freaking close. And
Yeah.
then like nowadays, like I'm very congruent with like I'm still healing, but very if I get angry, I feel very validated now. Like I'm so comfortable being, but I want to talk about that. Like I feel comfortable being angry these days. What you said, when I first started that journey, I thought that I was not allowed to be angry because I do angry bad.
Right.
And so I labeled anger as a bad thing. So if something made me mad, I must have did something wrong. I must have failed somehow. I can't do anger. Anger's bad.
Oh my gosh.
And the realization, as it took me years. It doesn't have to take everyone that long. I'm I hit the wall a few times.
Yeah.
But the realization, like now, the realization is anger is not bad. I may have been expressing anger in a way that was not beneficial, helpful, useful. Okay, I may have, but anger is not bad. And furthermore, anger for myself, is a telltale that a lot of times it's self. Okay, but sometimes it's
Yeah.
others. There's a boundary that has either not been implemented that should have been implemented, or there's a
Yes.
boundary in place that has been crossed that shouldn't have been crossed. And a lot of times it's self crossing the
Yeah.
boundary.
Oh, yeah.
And then we get
I could
mad and project
relate.
it to everyone else. But in reality, if we just reflect for a second, we're like, oh, I violated that boundary.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I can relate so much. And I feel like I especially went through a journey like that last year where, yeah, I just tried to shove down the anger and pretend it wasn't there because I thought it was bad. And then, it came to a point where I was just like, raging inside because it was like, oh, I wasn't honoring my own boundaries.
Boom.
They were the people involved, in this challenge were not honoring mine. And it did help me see that anger is like a healthy emotion that can tell you when something is off. And there's ways to express it. And I like to, when I guide people in breath work, to have them scream into a pillow and just like let it all out, because I find that anger can be very physical, right? And I don't know if you've
Hmm.
experienced it that way too. It's not really, oh, I don't know. You can journal, I guess. I've tried that. It hasn't really worked. It's more of like a screaming or like punching a pillow. It's like a very physical type of emotion.
Yeah, and he's a generally. I agree. I agree. I think generally speaking, needs that kinesthetic style release.
Yeah.
I will say, just sharing with everyone, just as a um, evidence of, what's possible, I guess. Um, of course, I can. It's possible I could get triggered in some anger outburst. It's possible. Generally speaking, there's a very, very, very far and few in between it at this point in my journey. Um, and I've even got to a point in my journey now, and again, just highlighting this for other people, where when I get angry at someone, like I'm like most people, like I will sit down and have a conversation with someone and tell them like I am
Yeah.
like beyond frustrated with you. And people
Yes.
will be like, "Well, you don't seem that mad." Well, I'm not going to give you a negative show, but I'm very comfortable like letting like I'm highly upset with you right now. Like not a little bit, like I'm highly upset. And I say that to let people know, like there's a day, if anger's your thing, because like anger was my thing. If anger's your thing, keep going on the journey, because there's a day where you can sit so comfortably and validated in your anger.
Yes, I love to hear that, and I feel like I very much agree and feel my experience has been the same, where it's like now when I get that anger, it's like, okay, voice it because that's how you're addressing it and that's how you're almost like releasing it. And I feel more comfortable doing that than, letting it simmer. So I love that you say like you fully express it. I haven't said, I'm highly, highly angry, but like I'll say something where it's just like, okay, this needs to happen. Like I don't feel like I'm getting, what I need. And I think it's very empowering because, people sense that. Like, they sense when you're expressing your truth and they're like, oh, okay. And it doesn't have to get to this boiling point. You don't have to be passive aggressive and, triggered
Bingo.
and all that.
I
Yeah.
think I'm going to share an experience that took place in our house, and I think we're talking about 2 years ago, maybe like between 2 to 2.5 years ago. Last 2 years of my life, I've had again. I tell people my journey's been about 12 years, a little over 12 years, and the last 2 years have been really deep in the spiritual and embodiment side of things.
Mm.
I didn't quite understand that word before, but when you explained it, I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I too was very good at dissociating from my childhood. Well, the problem, like that works great. Like I'm exceptional in business, very logical, all of that good stuff. But oh yeah, what about my wife and kids? Like
Right.
I want to fully attach for them, and a lot of times I'm like, well, I did all the chores. This is done. This got done. What's the problem? Because
Right.
logically I did all the things.
Yeah.
So I, the last 2 years, a lot of embodiment for me to allow me to attach and associate. So anger. So probably about 2.5 years ago, this is when maybe about 2.5 years ago, really came into a place where I had started to accept the parts of like I realized that I was allowed to have anger. So about two and a
Right.
half years ago. And so this is a literal example. This is the first, like, I will never forget. I can't imagine I'll ever forget this. Like, this is the first, like, I remember when it fell out of my mouth. I like thinking, like, I looked back at myself afterwards and I was like, did you just say that? So my wife had, I was like doing whatever I'm doing in the house. I don't remember the details. And my wife says to me, she says, something about, she asked something and I gave a response and it was kind of a short response. And she says, well, I think you have an attitude. Now, me and my wife have a great relationship. And by the way, I'm exaggerating her tonality. She might not have said it like that, but okay. She says, yeah, I think you have an attitude. I stopped and I looked at her and I said, no, no, no. I said, I don't just have an attitude. I said, I'm really upset right now because this, and this hasn't taken place. This should have went down. I should have done this. I probably need a moment, but I'm actually more than just having an attitude. I'm really upset right now. And my wife said okay, and she gave me a moment, and then we processed it, and life went on just fine. That was the first time I realized, oh shit, I'm allowed to be mad.
Yeah.
And that was super powerful for me. That was the first time I really like set out like I like not only do I have an attitude, I'm mad right now.
Right.
Um, and it felt so good to validate that and to
I
be in
love to
touch.
hear that. Yeah, I love
Mhm.
that it's just like accepting that this is normal and then you were able to express it and then move on. And I think that's if so many people understood that you can experience all these emotions and it doesn't make you bad or make
Mhm.
you yeah, especially I think in the personal growth and spiritual community, it's like, oh, like that's not the your higher self,
Right,
acting
right, right.
It's like, no, actually, like, I think that's why the embodiment work to me is so important. It's like we're human, and that's just part of our natural way of being. And then we can communicate better when we understand what's going on inside of ourselves. We can, share that with those around us.
Absolutely incredible. I can only imagine that the women that you're working with, the the aha moments and the realizations that you're able to facilitate through their journey. How did you know, um, what took you to the realization of, women are my people, as far as serving and
Yeah,
coaching?
that's a great question. I actually started out coaching mostly men. And so I found that men were also like looking to find their purpose and create that through their career. And I think that was a big part of how my business started and helping people with finding their career and making that fit for them. And so, but then it came to a point where I realized there's actually these issues that they are going through that I don't understand around like self-worth and how
Mm.
do they show up. And I realized like I understand this from a perspective for women because it's my own lived experience. And that's when I really got drawn to feminine embodiment work, because I learned that there's all this conditioning around women and how they can be in the world, and that's just stored in their nervous system because it's collective. And I
Mm.
realized that my experience in the working world and the business world was very similar to the women that I was working with, who are high achieving and having to hustle to prove their worth, and working in a masculine way to try and keep up with their peers, and trying to compete and like not connect with their emotions. And then they get to a point of
Mm.
like, I'm not happy at all, and I'm burnt out, and I don't like what I'm doing. And it's really about giving themselves permission, and also like building this healthy relationship with their masculine side and their feminine side, because I found that the women that I was working with and that I work with are really stuck in their heads, and they're not connected because these traits in women, like being great at communicating and being nurturing, sometimes I think in business, like they're discounted and they're not viewed as important as the logical, the action, the doing. And so I'm basically helping women to unsubscribe from that
Mm.
mentality and, be able to create that in their own life by owning it. And it's really cool to see how their changes then, impact the collective. And I really do believe it starts on the individual level.
I love this. I gotta highlight something for you at some level. You know this, but I don't know if you've consciously digested it. And then for the listeners, something that's really cool that I just like tuned into and was like, what? So started working with men, realized that there's a missing connection in some pieces, submitted ego, hold on, forewent fixing yourself, decided to learn who you are, and then realized that you had a connection with women. See,
Absolutely.
some people could have stopped there and tried to, first of all, ego, right? There's parts that I'm not connecting on there that I could do that they must be doing, and then fix myself. How can I figure out how to connect with these men?
Right.
But instead, you didn't. You submitted ego. You didn't need to fix yourself. You learned who you were, and you realized I already have gifts that connect and align with this group. I just wanted to
Absolutely.
highlight that. That was super powerful.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's what I was surrendering. And, I think even in the beginning, I saw a lot of coaches, oh, they only help women. And I was like, I don't know if I'm supposed to do that. Like, I
Right.
feel like everyone has these types of issues. And then, I just, yeah, like you said, let go of the ego and followed, what was wanting to come through me and how I could serve best.
Mm, super powerful. Now, how long have you been roughly uh, coaching, be it formal, informal, whatever the case may be? How long has it been since you said, you know what, I'm going to start guiding some other people?
Yeah, so since 2018, that's when I first started coaching, got my certification, and launched my business.
Beautiful. That's powerful. Been 5 years. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
I'm sure you've impacted many. Tell
Mhm.
us a little bit about at any level you'd like, any level of abstraction. What do you see so far for the future of for yourself and your business?
That's a great question. Yeah, I have again been letting go of ego, and what's actually been a really interesting journey is more public speaking that I'm being called to do. And it really came through at the start of this year, actually. And I had a reading with a friend who's an intuitive, and she was like, "Oh, you're meant to be on all these stages this year and all these panels, and you need to get all this in order to do that." And I was like, oh, my ego's like, that's, a lot of a growth edge. And I think I've grown up as someone who's been maybe a bit more shy, a bit more introverted. And so I've done talks, of course, but to be like that as a big part of my business, I had a lot of resistance. But so many things happened that connected me with this speaker coach, and she invited me to this boot camp, and I was like, I don't know about this, and she's like, I can give you a scholarship. She's like, just come. And then from there I ended up working with her, in her group program long term. And it's just the changes that have come from that have been profound. And I really do believe it's this connection of, once you have healed a lot of your inner world, and then being able to express it externally, which is really
Mm,
a big part of the work that I do with women. And it's like, what better way to do that than speaking and being able to impact people on a larger level like that. And so that's the next step for me and for my business. And because I've just surrendered to that, it's just like things flow, and I actually really, really enjoy it. It really lights me up.
that is awesome. That is incredible. And for everyone listening, we are going to have, if you're listening in to the audio right now, you can check out our video. We are on YouTube. The channel is Success After Trauma. And we are going to have Emily's links posted right there on the YouTube channel. So you can go check it out. Click on those links right there. For anyone that is interested, has an event going on and would like to connect with Emily as a speaker. Emily, real quick, would you say for everyone listening to just the audio, what's the best place for someone to reach out to you, connect to you? Maybe it's for coaching, maybe it's just connecting with you, maybe it's a question, maybe sharing something about their life, or maybe they would like for you to be speaking on their stage. What's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, thank you. The best way to connect would be my website, guidetowholeness.com, and Instagram as well, same name, Guide to Wholeness.
Guide to Wholeness. Perfect. And again, if you're listening to the audio, you can go check out the video, and we're going to have that link right on there. Emily, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on here. I love your energy. I, I, I probably, like, if I went back and looked at all of the guests, I'm like, do I say that to all my guests? Okay, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know that I do. Um, all things are not equal.
Mm.
I enjoy having this platform. I enjoy being able to allow people to have their voice through this platform. I was talking to my wife about this the other day. I do not monetize this podcast in any way, shape, or form. I pay someone to produce it. It literally, at the end of the year, it's 5 figures just to get voices out there and to raise that collective frequency and vibration of the human race. I say that to say it's always a pleasure to have every guest that is willing to be vulnerable enough to share on this platform. And it is extra special when I get to connect with guests that are further along on their personal journey of healing, that get to show up very vulnerable, that get to show up very organic, that get to show up very transparent. I get to connect with and feel your energy, and I appreciate it. It was incredible energy that you shared today, Emily.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on, Greg. I really appreciate the safe space that you create and the intention around, success after trauma, because I think so many people, myself included, when you're in the thick of it, it seems like it's never ending. And so I think
Mm.
it's really inspiring to hear from so many people how they made it through. So thank you for creating this platform and helping so many people doing that.
Thank you so much. Now, before we go, I always have I ask my guests kindly, if they will share some final words. And what I do is, for each guest, I have no, at the end of the episode, I have no, it's not prepared in any way. I just kind of channel whatever I'm called to. So I'm going to
Mm,
share with you an avatar, if you will, or a person. And then I would like for you, if you would just channel and share a final thoughts message to them. And so if
cool.
you would speak to if you would share a message to the high performing female.
Mm,
So she is not this message specifically. This is just who I feel called to ask you to share to. So this female is producing in her own ways and not necessarily just in business, although that could be included. So she's high functioning in her household. She's high functioning in business. She's up and moving every day. It's not like she's just trying to get going. She's going. Um, but she probably believes that she has to do all these things. That's why she drives so hard. So
mm.
she's actually a slave to her thoughts. And she probably hasn't connected with her heart yet. Can you share a message with her? Some
Yeah,
parting
I love
thoughts?
that. I love that. And my message would be to start to honor your value based on your being and your way of being in the world and the qualities about you versus your doing. And I think that's the biggest thing that I see with women like that who have this drive to satisfy everyone else around them and put themselves last is this belief that that makes them worthy. And so if you can shift that, and even as a leader, I think it is absolutely necessary to start to realize like it's actually the way that you show up in the world and the way that you're being that you're able to empower others, and it's not doing. And I think that's the biggest thing that I see for women, even I'm just talking about in the corporate space, who want to make the leap to manager or director. It's like you have to focus more on your qualities of leadership versus like how many tasks you're going to do in the day. And I think that mindset can be applied to life in general.
So great. Thank you so much, Emily. And for everyone listening, again, if you caught us on the audio, you can check us out on video on YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can download us from your favorite podcast streaming platform and listen to us on your way to work. We appreciate you. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. And until next week, be great. It's already in you.